want to do the elbows and then have the person who gets the award come in here all the way.
Or when we can start.
Is that a shot or what?
I think part of the issue is that as we're learning with some of this technology, it's one of those, you know, that we had installed it one day before it went live, and having learned all this, and it's relatively new for also coming out with all that.
Blame it all on COVID.
You know what, I did notice on Facebook that.
Okay, Colleen says we're ready here, so we are back recording our council meeting of June the 24th, and I believe that we have a bit of a special event today. Last week, the AMM had their June district meetings, and at those meetings, if we were normally together, we would have our presentation of service pins for members of council who have been on a council for 5 years or more. As the meetings were virtual this year, the AMM has mailed all the pins, and at this time we are going to do the presentations to those council members who received their service pins this year. So I will hand it over to our CAO, Deepak Joshi, to do our presentations for us, and we will continue on with our meeting once we're done this.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the 2020 Eastern District Service Awards are being given out. For the first one will be to the Arm of St. Clement's David Sutherland, Councillor, for 5 years.
Would you like me to go stand? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sutherland. Next is for the Arm of St. Clement's, Councillor Robert Belanger, for 10 years of service.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now, for the longest serving, for the Arm of St. Clement's, Councillor Glenn Basarowicz, Deputy Mayor. 15 years.
Thank you.
And lastly, but always first in our heart, for the Arm of St. Clement's, Mayor Debbie Feeblecorn, for 10 years of service.
And that pretty much closes our awards presentation for today. So if we have 1 minute to get back to our positions here, we will continue with our council meeting. Thank you, and congratulations to all those who received their awards today.
Thank you.
And hopefully we'll be around for a few more years to collect some more awards.
Right.
Well, could, Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Could, like, if Scott and Sandra and myself, if we add it all together, would we have 5?
Not quite yet.
We're gonna share a pin and pass it out.
Yeah.
Oh, if you guys want?
Well, if we want, we can do it.
No.
Oh.
Would all the award winners like to get a group shot?
Sure, we'll have to do the social distance though. We'll have to
Yes, I
stay.
gotta read that stuff where
Yeah.
it was.
Glenn and Rob, do you want to come up here, please?
Sure.
They're going to stand to the back. Rob, you and I can stand in the
Yeah, sort of
front.
stagger.
Yeah, and then,
That's not
move over a
social
little bit.
distancing.
6 feet.
yeah, and
Not by that word.
Dave and Glenn can go in the back. And Deepak, do you want to get in the middle here, just to kind of
This is for the ones that received the medals,
move over a little bit?
the pins for years of service. We'll do that first and then.
Okay, are we all kind of
Social
good?
distance in?
Dave, just that way, just a little bit. Perfect. Debbie, in just a little bit, and then I know you're still right there. And Glenn? Thanks. Okay, one more.
Why are you laughing?
Because your fingers were
Wait,
moving.
they're gonna tell me.
Is she
Okay,
doing
we'll
one
do one
yellow
with the
feedback?
CAO and
Oops, hold on.
what's this back here?
Yeah.
Hiding my fingers.
Thanks, guys.
Okay,
We
thank
should
you.
do one, Sandra, Scott, myself, and Heather. I don't like this.
We'll do that at supper time.
Just look.
I'll find you a pin at home and bring it for you.
I pulled up that was last year, just
We don't make those anymore.
Don't worry about it.
We'll have to sort everything out here. Perfect.
Yeah, just for the TV. No worries.
Okay. So calling the meeting back to order. We are at number 8. We have no bylaws today, and so we are at communications for information. And I am not sure if there's anything that Deepak wants to bring to our attention, or if it was just more for information purposes. Deepak, was there anything that you wanted to, other than, I know at 9.7.1, Bill 48, I believe Deepak was just going to have a few words, and then I think we'll be discussing it a little bit later on in the meeting. Deepak, did you have anything you wanted to share at this point?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The first one is from the Minister of Sports, Culture and Heritage. We received a letter stating that the application that we had applied for, we have received the grant for $2,590 for the Heritage Grants Program. And what they've done is the first installment has already been delivered to us for $1,295, representing 50% of the department's total commitment to our organization. And this is for your information. This is good news that another grant has come forward for the municipality. The next item is the ATV, the Bel Air ATV insurance policy. This is a requirement for the Bel ATV, ATV Club, Bel Air ATV Club, and for their all-terrain vehicles. This is a requirement to show us that they have all the proper insurance, and it's information for council. It's been submitted. What we have next is information for council, which is the, and if you give me a second, I'm trying to get my PowerPoint working, and I think there we go. So what we'll do now is talk about the Bill 48 is our next item, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
And Bill 48, there was a discussion, as I mentioned before, the Winnipeg Metro Region CAOs discussed some of the issues and concerns related with Bill 48 as information for council. A working group was established, a subgroup of them, and they submitted a report that would be a report that all councils would have access to and be able to use as necessary. So the intent of that is that this is not a decision paper or to tell council how to move forward, but it's more of a discussion document that all councils should be able to have. The intent of this entire document was, is here, so what I'd like to do today is to present to you, I've created a PowerPoint and I'll walk through, because I know that this was given in very short order for council, and it's a fairly thick document that you've been provided electronically, and what I wanted to do was sort of walk you through it quickly as I can, on what this document's about and how it could possibly be used. I recommend that the rest of the discussion after my presentation would be an in-camera discussion, at which point council can then decide on what level of, if they prefer to move forward on whether it's a resolution of council now or in the future, or whether it's some other factor. So based on that, what I'll do is I'll start off my PowerPoint presentation on this. And what I wanted to first of all mention is the intent and the purpose of this document. This document was created, as mentioned, by the subgroup and then reviewed last Thursday by the entire group of CAOs, and any changes that were needed to be addressed were addressed at that time. The City of Winnipeg was part of this sub-working group as well. There were representatives from the City of Winnipeg in this subgroup. And the intent that we all agreed to was that this has been prepared by the CAOs of the Winnipeg Metropolitan Region as to provide support materials for the Winnipeg Metro Region Councils to consider the impacts of Bill 48 and what they may have on their operations. So in that, they've sectioned it off into, as I've presented to you, you've seen Bill 48 presented to you in many different ways, and this is yet another way of presenting. So what they've identified is the planning regions as one of the main components, and all the items that are related with those planning regions. So what I've highlighted for you is the item that they've identified, and what I'll do is speak to the impacts, and then what are some considerations. Now these are considerations being for council, not recommendations, and not necessarily the way to move forward, but something that council can take into consideration. So in this first clause, this section basically gives authority to the member municipality to enter into an agreement with a planning region to administer and enforce some of the key land use planning responsibilities. But it doesn't take into consideration is if it's a planning district, the authorities to enter into these agreements rests with the planning district, is the interpretation. And so the member municipality, by being a member of the planning district, is automatically now committed to being whatever is negotiated at the planning district level. So that's what they've said. And in that, they've identified certain considerations that could be asked of the provincial government when they go into look at making some of those changes. And that is to empower member municipalities the power to enter an agreement with the planning region to administer and enforce key land use planning responsibilities, even if they are part of the planning district. So what it's doing is, if you're in a planning district, maybe a member municipality wants to have a planning region provide those services as opposed to the planning district, and to give that ability if a member municipality wants to do that. The other is empower the member municipality to determine, in the event that their planning district enters into an agreement with the planning region, the municipality would then have the ability to repatriate those responsibilities away from the planning district itself. So that's two of the comments that have been made. We'll have some further discussions on that as we move forward in it. The next was the section in PR2, which is related to basically the planning region is provided with extensive powers that exceed individual powers of member municipalities. What I should note here, what is identified is that there are opportunities for the planning region to be able to receive, expend a loan, invest money, borrow money, give security for repayment of money borrowed, so forth, exercise other powers. So in discussions with the province on this, and we've discussed this before, what they did was they duplicated the capacity for the planning region, similar to what they've already given, to the district planning districts. So the planning districts have been seen as corporations, so they have certain abilities and intent. Whether they've been exercised or not is a different story, but that part of the legislation already existed. And what they've done is duplicated that for the planning region as well. Now, that creates some concerns on some CAOs as part of this discussion, and this is, in order to deal with those considerations, they're saying, to provide greater clarity and consistency, limitations on these powers should be included in the legislation and not the regulations, which may be changed without an appropriate level of transparency or due democratic process. Limitations on the planning region's ability to invest should be aligned with the limitations placed on the municipal governments in the legislation itself, so that they should be able to invest more or be able to put, and that's a valid point, I think, to be able to take that into consideration, that we've had discussions on the municipality's ability to borrow. So if you have you have legislation on the maximum amount that you can borrow, but if there's a district or a region that's able to borrow, now can they borrow and have an impact on your capacity to borrow? Because at the end of the day, the municipalities are the guarantor of the districts. So the planning regions should also not have the power to borrow money, so another consideration, and therefore create a liability for member municipalities, as I've just sort of mentioned, without their formal agreement. So a formal agreement. And the thing is, we need to also understand, this ability has sat with the districts for many, many years. It hasn't, from my perspective, I haven't seen any major impacts to this date, but if there's an opportunity to correct the legislation or to adjust it, maybe this is the time to do it. So an example, borrowing must be approved by elected councils and be subject to the same requirements for public hearings and approval by the municipal board. This should be done by legislation and not regulation, was the comment made there. Because some of these items have been identified earlier in the province as indicated that they could be addressed as part of future regulations. On PR3, which is our planning region, item 3 is basically related with real property. And what it's doing is it can be expropriated. Again, this was in the planning districts legislation, so legislation under the Planning Act for the creation of planning districts. It allowed planning districts to be able to go in and expropriate. So they gave the same, again, authority to the planning region. The question is, should a district be able to do that? So it's unclear as to why a planning region would require the power to expropriate, and such powers seem excessive and unnecessary, available for abuse, because that's been identified in there. The planning region's power of expropriation does not have the same limitations as municipal governments, i.e. limited to expropriating for municipal purposes. So what would be if you're going to give that level of expropriation, what would be the reason for it? Without limitations, it seems the planning region has the ability to expropriate lands held by municipal governments. So that's been one of the items that's been identified, and in discussions with the City of Winnipeg, one of the things that they've identified as an example, if the planning region decides that there's a need for a regional service area, can they expropriate something like, as an example, could they expropriate the planning region comes in and expropriates the Brady Road landfill and turns it into a regional landfill site for all regions? Would that be an ability for them to do it? Under what regulations could they do that? You know, and so that's been some of the discussion, and it needs to be ironed out. So the considerations are remove this power and empower cooperation with the respective municipal governments in which desired land resides as a municipality already has the power to expropriate. So collaboration through expropriation, or expropriation, sorry, through collaboration. Add the legislation or requirement for the municipality in which the land is to be expropriated to formally agree with the expropriation before it must be undertaken, or identify that the municipality must agree with that expropriation. Add the legislation similarly that the planning region's powers for expropriation as imposed upon municipal governments. So saying that if you're going to give this to the planning region, put the same regulations in there that the municipal governments have as to under what circumstances they can expropriate. And mainly, I think some of those concerns from the CIOs is it's because some of those comments are as to what's happening as the next steps. Who's going to be on the planning region, how are they going to be governed, and basically governance-based points from what I can tell. On the item 4, which is dealing with regional planning bylaw, basically what's identified here is the legislation does not offer any ability for elected councils or member municipalities will be subject to the provisions of the regional plan, which shall include limitation requirements for municipal services within their municipality to agree or approve such provisions. There's no requirements to consult or get approval from the democratically elected council members to when they're establishing their bylaw. The legislation does not clearly articulate the process for regional plan approval, but suggests that it must be generally consistent with the processes used to approve a development plan. The language is vague, open to broad interpretation, does not offer any certainty for member municipalities who have no legislative input into the plan. Add, so the consideration that they're suggesting is add to the legislation a requirement for the planning region to get approval from councils of all member municipalities before a regional plan may be submitted to the minister for approval. That might be challenging if you take a look at the number of municipalities, but there are ways of looking at it. Maybe there are sections of the regional plan. Add to the legislation a clear, transparent, and an unambiguous process for regional plan approval. So basically, whether it should be done as part of regulation or should it be done as legislation. The recommendation is deal with it in legislation, don't leave this open. This is one of the comments that's being made. And that seems to be more of a consistent comment that's out there. The next item is requirements for regional plan. And the provision is for the municipal services should be determined by an unelected body and imposed upon a municipality. Services and service levels are the major driver behind the expenses of a municipality, and these should be determined by the elected councils. So they're saying, can they, a regional plan must contain plans and policy respecting. So what they're saying is the provision of infrastructure, services and facilities within that region, including drinking water and so forth, could they be determined at a regional level as opposed to a municipal level? To remove this clause from the Act was the consideration, or amend the clause to indicate that plans may include such provisions if and as approved by the member municipalities. Because there's some concern that there may be a requirement for a regional sewer system and has a significant impact on the ratepayers, or a stormwater retention plan. The other is item number 6, which is compliance with plans, which is the ability to match all the plans that have been submitted, a regional plan to the local development plans, and excuse me, as well as the building plans, or the zoning bylaws and so forth. The impacts, while it appears the member municipalities are not required to implement the regional plan, compliance with the plan may be enforced by the planning region. That being that the plan, it isn't approved by the municipalities, but it's approved by the minister. All plans are approved by the minister, and this is an overarching plan, the regional plan. The sections will undoubtedly cause conflict in future, as there are no limitations placed on what sort of scope of proposals could be included in the plan. There's a risk, I guess. For example, a member municipality does not have to to provide sewer and water services in its municipality despite it being called for in the plan. However, it can approve a subdivision or development without it providing for said services if it is required by the plan. So if, as an example, what they're saying is the regional or the municipality is not providing sewer and water services, but the regional plan says you must have to provide water and sewer services. So that means somebody comes in for a subdivision, you have no provision of sewer and water services, and you can't approve because the regional plan says no subdivisions or no future development without sewer and water. So that is a risk, as an example. Amend clauses 10.32C to indicate that plans may include such provisions if and as approved by the member municipalities. 2, add to the legislation clear and specific elements of the regional plan, which a planning region may require compliance, and those elements that it may not. Provide a non-court appeal process for member municipalities to appeal compliance notices and actions for the planning region. That's the third option that they recommended. Moving on to the next items, which is mandate for the planning region of a planning region. The mandate of the planning region is to enhance economic and social development by improving, coordinating, sustaining sustainable land use and development of the region through all these items. Basically, the impacts that have been identified as the mandate for a planning region is exceptionally broad and overlaps with mandate given to municipal governments, creating the potential for conflicting intentions and actions. And that's where proper governance and discussions can be addressed. The general powers, while restricted by regulations, offer unlimited power to carry out its mandate. Because we have no regulations that are accompanying this regulation or this legislation, there's an ongoing concern as to how will this broad legislation be implemented without the regulations that can sort of clearly articulate how that can be done. And what the considerations are, number one, is remove the clause itself. If necessary, include any specific powers reasonably necessary for a planning region. Or modify it to clear the planning region's mandated, modify it to make it clear that the planning region's mandate is to support the enhancement of economic and social development goals of the member municipalities and its elected councils. Or add, item 3 as for consideration, add to the legislation the restrictions rather than have them included in the regulation, which would offer greater clarity and stability of the planning region's authorities. So use 10.2.2D as restrictions. The next is item number 8, which is composition of the board. And the composition gives extensive authority and powers, providing a planning regions. It would be more appropriate if the composition of the board is established by legislation, was one of the impacts. The other is current wording does not indicate whether the municipalities will be represented by elected members of council. And the other is, as written, the minister has the power to appoint non-elected people to the board, offering no accountability to the impacted municipalities. And the other is, by determining the board's composition by regulation, the governance structure of the planning region could be changed at the will of the minister without due public discourse. And the other is the process is different from the process used to appoint representatives to district boards. So this seems to be a different process. So what they're saying is amend clause to allow member municipalities to determine by council resolution and at their discretion their representatives. And second is clearly articulate the process for determining board composition in the legislation rather than by regulation. As you can see, part of the theme seems to be regulation and legislation. Next is number 9, which is determining the amounts to be raised, which is basically the funding. The regional board is effectively provided the powers of taxation, is the comment being made here, without those being taxed, the right of elected representation must receive support by 50% plus one of all member municipalities. The other is required that the planning region must first hold a public hearing before it can adopt a financial plan. Next is establish a legislation the appeal process for member municipalities. Next is establish in legislation maximum amount where the planning region can portion to a municipality as the portion of its assessment base, so compared to assessment base. So that's some members were concerned that a portion may be higher than what they're able to collect. And that require the member municipalities must show the amount portioned by the planning region as a separate charge. So that's a long-standing argument which also shows up for school taxes. The next item is item 10, regulations. In here, the minister may make regulations, and they're described there for your consideration. What the impacts here are is including critical elements of the planning region's board structure and governance model in regulation does not offer an acceptable level of transparency. So basically, planning region's board structure and governance model has been said that it'll be established through the regulations, and it's coming back. Legislation is all you have to review right now. How do you deal with it? By setting matters such as vote weighting and executive appointments via regulation, the regional board will be accountable to the minister and not the member municipalities. Now that's the regulation because it's coming in at the first time. After that, it's regulation. So would it be any different if legislation comes in from the province? Regulations have to be approved by the province as well. Considerations: remove clause 10.21 through from the legislation, or number 2, establish legislation that matters identified in 1021 1A through F must be determined and agreed to by all member municipalities as a required condition of formation of the planning region. So it's trying to make it clear that when you go to do that regulation, that there's a level of involvement between the municipalities and the planning region. Articulate the matters identified A through F in the legislation rather than in regulation. The other option is articulate it in the legislation as opposed to regulation. So as mentioned earlier, and I'll keep saying, there's definitely a definitive theme. Number 11, which is now administration and enforcement of the bylaws. The planning districts are given the ability to transfer the responsibilities to the planning region. So the planning district can get into a negotiation with the planning district without consent or agreement of the member municipalities. That's how it's interpreted. And so these responsibilities have a significant impact to the citizens of the member municipalities. So it's shedding responsibilities from a district up to a region, as an example. Transferring administration of planning functions to the planning region could add additional costs and shift frontline services delivery outside the member municipality, again, without consent of the member municipality. That's where the impacts have been possible impacts have been identified. For consideration, establish in legislation the opportunity for municipalities in the planning district also served by a planning region to opt out of the planning district. So it's coming back to that earlier comment. Amend clause 1020 to require that all member municipalities of the planning district must approve by resolution of council the proposal to enter into such agreement with the planning region prior to its completion. You could also establish that through the board of the planning district too. Tell the planning district that could be a resolution of them before they're able to ask for any services to the planning region, that they must get the approval of the member municipalities. So that covers the planning region component of it. Next is the capital region formation. Okay, the capital planning region is hereby established. So in here, it's included municipalities. So it lists out all the municipalities. So the legislation is pretty clear. It lists the name of the municipalities. So municipalities who were former members of the voluntary mayors and reeves of the Capital Region organization. This group was formalized in legislation into the Partnership of Manitoba Capital Region, but with no authority over the municipalities, later which is called the Winnipeg Metro Region. The municipalities would be mandated by legislation to fall under this new body, which is given extensive powers and authority over the municipalities without approval or demonstrated support for its authority by the municipality. Next is, if the partnership of the Manitoba Capital Region had been provided these powers in its original formation, such municipalities would have objected at that time being included in the partnership. So they're saying if they would have known that this was what was going to happen. The next is the inclusion of all member municipalities does not take into consideration the true economic and land use trade areas, which in some cases is not the Winnipeg Metro Region, is one of the comments. Valid comment. The identified municipalities and their citizens are not provided the opportunity to be consulted as articulated in clause 10.3. So what are the considerations? Number one, remove section 8 from the legislation and follow the process of establishing a planning region as articulated in sections 9 to 10 with the additions to the clause requiring proposed member municipalities as mentioned. Add to section 8, so a clause that provides identified municipalities' ability to opt in to the capital region at formation by passing a bylaw, similar to the process for joining a planning district. Or add to section 8 a clause that provides the identified municipality the ability to opt out of the capital planning region at the formation of the planning bylaw. So those are the three options and considerations. Next were the municipal board. So there were 4 things identified here as part of the municipal board. This has been discussed with you considerably already in the past. And so what they are is there's significant impacts which are addressing how to, in identifying introduction of the appeal process for zoning and secondary plans, conditional use and subdivisions, development plans and agreements, decisions of the municipal board are final, and so without any further appeal. The decisions made by the municipal councils and the planning districts are applicable, are usually done in context of the local community, and so these conditions are often specific and nuances, as they're saying, and are now being challenged at the municipal board level. These planning decisions have extensive downstream impacts on municipal infrastructure, and so financial viability, which makes it vital that the final decision to take these matters into consideration. So that's a municipal issue. Preparing for and defending a decision of the municipal board will create some new costs. And then finally, if there's zoning and secondary plans amendments, municipalities could face 2 separate municipal board hearings when it comes on basically on the same matter. What are some of the considerations? Remove the introduction of this appeal process to the municipal board. Number 2, restrict the municipal board's orders on these appeals to either confirm the decision as made or reject the decision, and order the decision-making body to reconsider the matter with specific guidance. The municipal board would not make the final decision on the application. So that seems to be a reasonable also an option. Number 3 is establish in legislation clear and transparent decision criteria of the municipal board to use while considering these appeals, including requirements to confirm decision and to comply with municipal bylaws, plans. Again, that's that regulations and legislation. Next is the role of the approving authority upon removal of these clauses eliminates. So what these are, these clauses have been removed. So what that does is eliminates elected councils from having veto authority over the approval of a subdivision within their municipality. It also, whereas the council's rejection of a subdivision application ensured that it could be approved and were no appeal processes available, the removal of these clauses gives the approving authority complete discretion to make the approval or denial. So it takes it away from council is the basic nuance there. This is a clear example of the authority of elected councils in critical land use decisions being eroded by these changes. So what it's saying is when you've taken these items out, so council has lost its ability. But there's recommendations: do not repeal or remove these clauses from the Planning Act. Do not repeal clause 126.1 is another option. The other is restrict the municipal board's orders on these appeals to either confirm the decision, as mentioned earlier, confirm or deny, but not to be the final authority. Send it back to the municipality is what the decision will be from the municipal board. Or establish clear legislation that's transparent in decision making and put it into the legislation itself. Next, I'm almost done, councillors. It's a very detailed presentation. Number 3 is additional sections again. These sections provide the municipal board with the ability to make the costs of the hearing and the costs incurred by the applicant payable by the decision-making body. That's a concern. The other impact is there is also no similar specific provisions in these changes to guide municipal boards to make these same costs payable by applicant if the appeal is found to be frivolous or without just cause. Remove these sections from the legislation is one of the considerations for the municipal board to, which already has the authority to allocate costs as they see fit. So remove it, they already have this authority. Include in the legislation a clear and transparent process for calculating costs, and guidelines for how that board may order the municipality or the planning district to pay. So have some clear guidelines as to how they may be able to. Include in the legislation similar clauses that include the municipal board to make the cost of the hearing a cost reasonably incurred by a municipality payable by the applicant. So if there's costs paid to the applicant, allow the other way around as well. The next is the sections on introducing hard deadlines for municipalities and planning districts. Some of this has already been identified by our regular planning district. Determining the completeness of development permit applications is 20 days. Holding public hearings, all these things have been identified: 20 days, 90 days, 60 days, 90 days, 60 days. It's all written in the documentation here. If these timelines are not met, the landowner applicant may file an appeal with the municipal board. And so these timelines do not scale to allow for different size in municipal administration. Having the same timeline for a community of 1,000 is not the same for a community of 700,000. And so the new timelines on an application process and decision may require some municipalities and planning districts to increase staff in order to meet these requirements. The other is to avoid negative consequences of missed deadlines. Municipalities and planning districts may eliminate certain grace periods for incomplete applications. So an application comes in and may be rejected immediately so that they don't run into some of these concerns. And also forcing developers to complete all requirements up front, which could extend the total time an application takes. So another item is that you allow joint applications in order to speed up the application process. Now, if you have specific deadlines, as an example, somebody comes in for a subdivision and a variance, and the variance is given a subdivision application and a variance, for an example, that they would come in, or a conditional use with the subdivision that's needed. The conditional use is 60 days. Subdivision was given 90 days. Now you've allowed conditional use of subdivisions joint applications because you want to accommodate the applicant in the process. Here, that may be turned down because the lower one, the applicant, is able to appeal after 60 days. And so now you're creating additional red tape and additional timelines that may not have happened before. And lastly, the other reasons to be provided: a regional planning board, a council, a planning commission, or a designated employee or officer must ensure that written reasons accompany the following decisions. And so these new requirements will be challenging, if not functionally impossible to implement, due to the nature of council decision making. As a council, each member votes based on their own understanding of the circumstances and their own will. The rationale for one member's vote may not be the same for all other members, even though their votes may be consistent. Given these rationale statements will be used by applicants as evidence in any appeal they may wish to undertake, municipal administrations will dedicate significant time and may engage legal support to prepare response letters that might mitigate any risk to the municipality should an appeal be submitted. So a decision may not happen. They may vote, and then in order to provide the reasoning, maybe adding more time to go out and get legal opinion as to how that reasoning is, so that you can't possibly lose the appeal later. And these are the ones that are rejected, as an example. There are no standards for these written response statements, so responses will be left to the municipal governments to determine and will vary from municipality to municipality. So, various responses. There's some considerations: remove the clause altogether, or add a section to the clause that indicates that written reasons shall only contain those reasons provided by members of councils or boards that were given during the public meeting where the matters was voted upon, and that no reasons were given that would be provided in writing. Add to the section a clause that written reasons are provided without prejudice, and that any documents may not be admissible during municipal board hearings or any court proceedings. So if there's written reasons that are required, and if you need one from each council member, you may want to ask that the reason is given, but it's not admissible in court for appeal purposes. So that's generally the comments that were identified in here. This document also has provided the report from the City of Winnipeg that went to their council for your consideration as well. It also has in here the administrative report on Bill 48 that was submitted by Mark Bate as the author, and the department has John Kiernan, which is from the planning department. Mark Bate was also a member of the sub-working group of this group that looked at working on this. It also has some samples of some resolutions that other councils have already done in advance of this report being done. So those resolutions are out there. And for your information, and we'll have further discussion as discussed. This is much more of an in-camera item for discussion purposes. If council does wish to provide a resolution, we can just do that after the fact. Thank you.
Thank you for that. That was a kind of a long briefing, but I think it's worth it because there are a lot of changes that are going to be coming our way, and tomorrow's tomorrow's meeting is partly to do with this also.
Exactly. So this gives council a bit of a precursor to possibly some of the discussions that might occur.
Well, and I think, you know, I mean, we will have more discussion in camera, but I think a lot of the unknowns are what is causing a lot of grief. Like even for our own planning district, we have a planning district that has approving authority, which others within the metro region don't have planning authority or final approval authority. What is going to happen with that RRPD? How does it fit into this new scheme? And I guess that's one of the questions that I think we'll be asking tomorrow as a Red River Planning District, not as a municipality. Like, how do we fit into the big scheme of things here? So, but we can have a little bit more discussion on that after in camera this evening. So, okay, any other comments or questions at this point? No? 2.7.2, which is the new collection calendar for waste curbside pickup.
Curbside pickup. Thank you, Madam Mayor. And what this is, basically, the curbside pickup new schedule has informed the council earlier that there was some changes occurring, mainly in Zone 4, as I recall. And so what they've created is a new mailer that'll go out, and just to make it clear, they will cover both days for up to 4 weeks once it's implemented. So, as an example, going from Wednesdays to Monday, they will then notify all residents, and will be picking up Mondays and Wednesdays for the 4 week in order to do the transition. And so the intent here is to communicate and then provide a level of service so that people aren't confused before the new level of service comes in. And so this lays out the description, identifies the dates, and a calendar for people to put up on their fridges or wherever they see fit. It also provides all the additional information such as what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. It lays out what days for what type of pickup, and will be sent out to all residents, so it's provided for you as information.
The only question that I had, because I didn't see it anywhere here, and I know that you say it's going to be done twice a week for the first 4 weeks or whatever, but when is it actually starting?
They were shooting for July the 1st was what they
Okay.
were looking for, and they're still working with Antera. There's some fine tuning that's occurring. What Greg's been given assurance by Antera is from the date that they notify and say this is the date we're starting from, that's when the 4 weeks will start.
The other thing that it doesn't have on here, like you said, it's going to be going out to all the residents. There's nothing on here with the date either, when it's going to be starting.
That will be included in the
Okay.
communication that's going out to them.
Perfect.
This is the package of information that they get.
Yeah.
As part of that, there will be an accompanying letter and that's why that hasn't been included yet, because they're still working out some of those details
Okay.
with Antera.
So this won't go out till the date is printed on here that goes with it.
This won't go out until the date is printed on the letter that goes along with this.
Right.
The information that makes sure.
Any questions, comments? Okay, looks like that's a go on that one. And then the last one we have is the Gaynor Family Library, the minutes, and they're attached there for whoever would like to review them. Any comments on that, or Councillor Spicer, have you any comments?
No, we've had another meeting since then, so
Okay.
I'll bring it up to you.
Okay, perfect, in your committee report.
Yeah.
All right. So that takes us actually down to our committee reports, number 10 on our agendas. And I think today I'm going to start with Councillor Boulanger.
I'm always an easy one.
I know.
Since since June 9th, our last council meeting, I don't have anything to report. I didn't attend the COW on the 16th, so nothing to report.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Strang.
June 11th, I attended on the webinar for the AMM, the Eastern District meeting. On there, they just updated, everybody spoke on Bill 48, reminded municipalities to be using any of the grants that are out there, and reminded everybody that we still have to do our code of conduct training. It's still required for November 2020. And I also attended Selkirk Biz meeting, and they're trying to promote people into our areas and enhance the group that they are. I found something very interesting that the mayor let me know that not one person, they're trying to promote BizBucks still, but she had found out that not one person in our RM uses or has been there to use the BizBucks. So say like any of our businesses that you can't take a BizBuck and go use it out of business. So I guess that's something that I have to take back to the board and just let them know, because what's promoting biz bucks, and that's what keeps them running, because they make a small percentage off of every card from the businesses when they're cashed in, so.
Is there many people in the Bismarck thing?
Yes, they sell actually a lot. It's mostly the core is this city of Selkirk. And one of the other things that the mayor did comment on is there's only one that's outside of the city of Selkirk, and it's in the RM of St. Andrews.
And it's Harry's Foods.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so that's something interesting. We do want to, I know that Grandma Ray has been brought in, and I know they're also working on, East St. Paul has put set interest out to
Well,
their
what's the-
chamber.
But what's the name of it? Not the Bismarck thing, but it's called Soccer Biz, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
And that's
there
where
are
all-
certain-
I think that's part of why nobody else wants to buy into everything that's going on, because it seems like it's just Sulphur.
and that has been brought up to them. And there are some members that while we're sitting there having a meeting, they do throw in "and district." And we do try to keep on reminding them. I know it's a more fancier, more attractive name, putting Selkirk Biz rather than having Selkirk and District Chamber, which they used to be called, but yeah, no, it is something that you're absolutely correct, that probably that's one thing that why some of the businesses don't want it. And I also attended a rec meeting that same day, and we're working on capital campaign and legacy park with Dave King. On June 12th, I attended for Sault St. Clements Activity Center. We had a trails announcement. Minister Wharton attended, did a presentation at a feature site along with our mayor, councillor, CAO, and assistant CAO. And we also had other businesses or other people that are involved in the capital campaign.
Local residents.
Yeah, local residents, yes. Somewhere, I'm trying to think of the company right now that they were discussed with, yeah, that they're doing the plans and that, yeah, we had some of the, that was interesting, you're right, Scott. June 16th, we had our committee of whole, we had updates about Bill 48, spoke about livestock certificate, creating a bylaw for grease traps, so everyone that's hooked up on sewer, and discussed gravel pits. On June 17th, had a webinar by Urban Systems, and it was all about funding for our community, just different ways. And it seems like they're really pushing for us to go for these, because there's lots of grants out there right now. And lots of these groups are, like, they're really pushing for municipalities to keep the economy going and to keep on going and apply, keep on applying for these grants that are out there. June 17th, we also had our George Cuff webinar. It was his master plan. And the big thing with him was roles of council and focusing on governance. Roles of the mayor, roles of councillors. On the 19th, he had his follow-up webinar. And it was more with questions. It was actually very interesting. One thing that he did emphasize on too is legacy planning. And as he was talking about it, I thought, why didn't you do that in your webinar when we first came on council? Because I thought it would have been great for something too, because I thought, we're halfway through right now. Now we're going to start legacy planning. It would have been something that would have been great at the beginning. And that's about it.
Thank you. Councillor Sutherland.
Okay, June 16th, the Sounders had our call meeting. And the following day, the George Cuff presentation was, as Sanders says, he focused on the roles of council, the mayors. June 18th, Deepak and myself, we did a tour of Gull Lake and the gravel pits. Our old gravel pits showed Deepak where they were, and then our, supposedly we were going to put our new pit, if things work out, just to give you some kind of perspective where it was. And then we also, while we're there, we went to the north end where the LGD of Alexander has their pit, and it's far closer to the Gull Lake area than where our new pit may be, you know, just to give some kind of a. And then also Chabot's other pit, 2 pits, we drove by there and showed Deepak what that was in relation to. You know, we might have our new pit if things work out. So just to give some kind of perspective, you know, of the area.
Bertram?
Pardon me? And that was it.
That was it.
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Horbus.
The only thing was on the 16th, the colony, that's all. That was it for me.
Okay. Councillor Spicer.
So I attended the June district meeting remotely, and we had the minister's update with a couple of $500 million more for infrastructure, road and bridge, water and sewer, so that, let's see when those are announced. And also the $45 million for mitigation and climate resiliency. There were some pointed questions about the ISIP grant. We're down to coming weeks now, so we'll see how that goes. I think what the challenge there is that the federal government and the provincial government are not really the same page on priorities, so that's part of the challenge there. And the presidents also spoke, as well as the vice presidents, and they went through their different portfolios. There is a joint working group for efficiencies in municipal government. The program is voluntary, but it's about value for money reviews, which is interesting. I'll just skip around a little bit. Still working on drainage approvals. Now there's more cost, and there might actually be more red tape. Code of conduct, of course, as Councillor Strang talked about. Same day, in the evening, we had a Gaynor Regional Library meeting, which was a regular meeting. So we went through agenda, minutes, and financial statement and library report. Finance-wise, the library looks like they're going to be okay, given the resources and the situation that they're in. They did get a $2,700 grant for Green Team. A lot of the meeting was on their new revised plan for COVID, and they are, I believe they started phase 3, so phase 3 changed a few things. The quarantine books for only 1 week now. They're allowing 10 people into the building. They will provide masks if needed. If there is a large amount of, let's call the second wave, that's the term, we've given the librarian the approval to move back in phases, go back to phase 1, for example. And, you know, work still goes on. We've got a collective agreement that we need to work on for the fall. Our next meeting is not until September. June the 12th, I also attended the South St. Clements Activities Center grant approval announcement with the province of Manitoba. June the 16th, we had committee of the whole, which we dealt with planning issues. Some discussion discussion on Bill 48 and 49, and of course, Public Works. Discussions on various things that we have coming up. And then June 17th, George Cuff, which was the governance webinar. Some good points. I've listened and been to George Cuff before. The main focus hasn't changed much over the years, but you know, there were some good pointers. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pasarovich.
June 11th, June district meeting here online. June 12th, with Mr. Wharton for the $75,000 grant for the south end. June 16th, committee of the whole here, talked about road tenders, porta potties, the Woodwasky subdivision. And then June 17th, the funding and planning webinar. And then June 17th, after that was the George Cuff webinar. That's it.
Thank you. Okay, I'm just going to quickly go through mine. June the 9th, we were here for our council meeting. June 11th, I did attend the AMM district meeting. June 12th, I had a North Red water maintenance meeting. There was a newspaper article saying that the province was looking to redo or resend or re-advertise the RFP, so we had again met to further our discussions on the next steps. We have still not gotten payment from the province for all the work that we did until the 7th of April, so we have not made a firm decision on what we are doing. Hopefully, we're hoping by the end of this month, it doesn't look that way, but hopefully by middle of July, they may have the RFP out. Because I guess we're looking at it that if we're not the successful bidder, whoever bids on it needs time to get the equipment ready and familiarize themselves with how the program has been working, where the home of the Amphibex is going to be, so on and so forth. So we have not made a firm decision, so we will wait. We're going to try and wait it out, but we said we'll wait until the middle of July for another meeting. Go ahead, Councillor Belanger.
I think it's fair to say that I don't think there's anybody else out there that has the skills or the ability or the know-how, the knowledge, the past experience that's going to bid on that. It's like bidding on flying to the moon when you've never flown to the moon before. I don't know, just...
There'll be bidders on it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, there'll be bidders on it.
Really, eh?
Oh, yeah, and there'll be somebody who's connected to that government.
Okay.
That's why they're not giving it to us.
Going forward, or the same day, that was in the morning, and then at lunchtime, we had the Soccer District Community Foundation nominating committee meeting, and we did submit Dave Thorne's name. He was elected to the board, and I believe Deepak circulated that email once all the nominees were notified that they were successful and they accepted. So we have Brandon Sutherland he was nominated by the school board, and then the gal that was nominated by the city, by St. Andrews was nominated. So I think they have a good mix. They were looking for some young people, and they were also looking for someone that had some, I guess, not legal, but writing bylaws and things like that. So the 3 people that they got, I think, will fit the bill there. So there will be a bigger announcement in July when they start their meetings again and things like that. And of course, again, on June the 12th, I was at the grant announcement. On the 15th, we had a South Basin Mayors and Reeves meeting. Financial statements are required, audited financial statements are required for us to get any monies or things like that. So basically, Colleen Sklar is going out to see if she can get an auditor at a relatively reasonable rate, because they are expensive to have your books audited. She also had a meeting, I guess, with her and Rick Gamble from Denaudre, met with Minister Gilmar to give the minister a better understanding and advise what we were about. And there was just some discussion on the next steps too for the, I guess, lake-friendly program, because it's kind of gotten to a point where it's just kind of sitting there and it has to be moved forward. So Colleen's gonna do some creative thinking on that one and bring it back to us. June 16th, we were here for a committee meeting. June 17th, the stimulus funding and projects webinar. I thought it was very interesting. There's lots of money out there. And now they're not even calling some of the projects shovel ready. You know, that was the big buzz, that all the projects had to be shovel ready. They're now saying that if they're shovel worthy, they would be considered. So we'll see what happens with that. And I did get the slides that were presented that day, so I was going to send them to DPAC, so if anybody does want them. I thought it was very interesting. There was lots of good information presented by the company, so I thought it was pretty good. And of course, June 17th, George Cup Masterclass. June 17th also, we had Red River Planning meeting. It was the first meeting back in the office. It didn't go as we had anticipated. Councillor Boulanger was there and we did have some trouble. The next meeting that we're going to have there, we still had some people that were attending virtually, and we had some in the chamber there, but I'm going to have to borrow a laptop because I couldn't see anybody. I saw 2 people on my iPad and it was very hard. I had to have other people telling me if there was questions or things like that, so it made it a little difficult. And then of course the sound system that they had installed didn't work great, and then the storm rolled in, so some of the people got knocked out because their power went out. So it was kind of like it just was not as good as we had wanted it to be. So, but we got through the meeting. So, the objections from the province regarding the development plan were reviewed, and the RRPD will advise the province once all RMs have dealt with their specific cases. Like St. Andrews apparently didn't deal with theirs yet, and I know that we dealt with ours, and hopefully RRPD has that information by now, so. And that's all I have. And Mr. Administrator, if you want to go ahead and give your report, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll start off with the office here. I've already provided this as an update on June 9th, but as further, our office opening here has gone very smoothly from June the 1st, and the reopening plan has been posted in all different sites. I've noticed that we're getting a lot more citizens coming into the office and beginning to use it. We've been able to accommodate the various staff needs, because even though we opened, not all services were available to all our staff. As example, daycare and other things, so we've taken those things into consideration. And we will, as we move forward and continue to increase the level of service, and hopefully we don't encounter any additional waves. If we can hopefully help with that. Second is communication of public information. We want to talk about the RMS St. Clements and its commitment to open and transparent government has continued to provide this information. Because we've gone through multiple stages of technology in order to move through this COVID environment. And so what I wanted to cover was some of the things that we've been doing and moving towards that. First is, of course, the work that was requested by council, the seasonal updates, spring and summer road maintenance procedures. I've posted on the website so that we can better communicate with our citizens what's happening and provide a little bit more real-time information as to the work that's happening out there for our citizens. Second was our council meetings. We went from starting them off in Zoom to doing them through YouTube to finally putting them through into this fashion today. I don't know if you've gone back to take a look at that. The technology continues to get better and better, and I think it's much more user-friendly as we get a better handle on it. A perfect example of that is that now you can go back to previous meetings, and when you take a look at a previous meeting and look at the agenda item, you can click on it and see the meeting discussion at that point of the agenda. So that's a wonderful, and we're refining it as we, and then I really want to also thank you to council for being patient as we've struggled through some of the technological challenges we've continued to face as we go through this. As you can see, we've set up a round table discussion now for council, and that's respecting our need to be providing social distancing, but at the same point being able to be open to the public and be transparent through our information that we're providing. All previous recorded council meetings and agendas are available online. Only recently have we started providing all of them. So the YouTubes and those, like the financial plan, has been made available, but all the other ones, we're trying to clean those up so that we have now a much more definitive way to move forward. The other is the South St. Clements Activity Center. There was several discussions and comments already made about the opening there. I won't get into any of the webinars that that I attended with all the members of council. Next was the economic development side. This is one of the items I want to discuss with council. It's in regards to the RM owned property at 5947 Henderson Highway. A developer had previously presented this as a plan in 2010 for the land assembly and to complete a single family subdivision in this area. Looks like the new developer members have got together and they're willing to come forward again. And they would ask, the assembly would include a portion of our lot at 5947 Henderson Highway, which extends all the way to Rebec Road, from Henderson to Iowa, all the way to Rebec Road with the tracks in the middle. The project did not proceed at that time, but the developer has again approached and is, what I'm suggesting to council is that we continue. I think the land has already been declared surplus, that we'll continue the discussions. So this is information for you that we're beginning to have some of those discussions. And what they want to do is look at having an option on that one parcel as part of that, and they may look at the part between the tracks and Anderson as phase one, and phase two from the other side of the tracks. I think the access would probably end up having to come off Donald Road or the other roads. Rebec. Yeah, the other access would come off of Rebec. Thank you. Okay, so, so tentative agreement has been reached on the 9 back lots to be sold at Sunset Bay. They are very committed, and we've discussed that already, and as soon as we can have that agreement signed, I'll be bringing it forward for council. They're prepared, and they know that we'd like to bring it at minimum to the July council meeting. As previously discussed, I'm motivated to the point that I need to make sure that our carrying costs for 2020 are minimized. The sooner we sell it, the less our costs are for carrying those lots. And finally, the other item, a grant application on June 19th, an application to Winnipeg Metro Region Disaster Prevention, as I mentioned earlier, was submitted. So this is part of that $15 million grant announcement that the projects selected under the program are eligible for 100% funding. And so this is for the Guns Creek diversion. So the project was also submitted for the ISIP grant funding, and if it was approved under there, it would be 66% funding. So this would be great news.
Dave's Creek.
Lastly, and I gave you a fairly long demonstration on this, so I won't belabor the terms on this one any further, which was the Winnipeg Metro Region's CAOs in the meeting on the 18th. I really felt that it was important to go through it in some level of detail, for the level of detail that's required for the bylaw, or Bill 48. So that's my report.
Thank you for that. Heather, do you have anything that you would like to share with us today? Okay. So I think with that, I will call for our supper break. Yeah, and we will be back at 6 o'clock for the planning items.
Yes, it is.